Hi artist, Miss Flashier here. It is time to paint our perspective drawings. This is a little one that I did just to do painting demonstration with, and people at home, because if you have other brushes, I would get them, but if you only have this one, you're gonna need your sponge too. Okay, so and you need your cup of water, paper towel, and that's it. Okay, so if you remember before when we did watercolors, when we had the liquid ones, we would wet the paper first. That's what we're gonna do with our sponge because it's gonna go a lot faster. So I got my sponge wet, I squeezed it all the way out. And the only thing that I'm painting water on is the road. And so I don't know if you can tell in the video, but it's getting shiny where the water is, okay? So now I'm gonna make my road black. If you decided to do yours with water, a canal or whatever, that's fine. You would do blues and watercolors. So if you see, it's all streaky where I'm putting the brush because the brush is so small. So if you add water after you put some color down, it will start to spread out nicer. And we added the water first to the road so that when you're adding color to the watercolor, it kind of keeps it on the road and it won't bleed into the trees or into your sidewalk. So that's why it takes a while to paint with watercolors because you have to let it dry in between. So I couldn't go and paint grass right here because the road is wet still. So I'm gonna start with this road. And if you see, I'm only using the paintbrush that you guys have, okay? So it is possible to do it with this paintbrush. It's just not the best. So now I'm spreading the paint down. You want it to look as even as possible. So right here, I have like these concentrations of color. And I'm not painting like this, and I'm not getting a whole bunch of paint and painting like this. I'm taking very deliberate brush strokes up and down, very lightly, okay? Remember, be nice to your brushes, okay? Don't give them bad hair days by jamming it into the watercolor like this and ruining the brush and the watercolor, okay? So my road is done, and I'm gonna let that dry, okay? And now I'm gonna start on the sky. I'm just trying to do big color blocks right now. So while this dries, I'm gonna start on the sky. And for the sky, I'm gonna use just the sponge. And we're gonna sponge paint just a little bit. So I'm taking a little tiny bit of blue, just like that much. And I'm gonna sponge the sky. You can also paint the sky. I just thought it might be nice to have a little bit of texture. And it's easier to paint big areas with your sponge at home. So now if you are gonna do your sun and you have a sunset or whatever that's going on in the back of above your horizon line, that's fine. Just let the blue dry first and then go over top of it with whatever you have in the background. So that's another technique you can do. You could have done the same thing on the road with the sponge painting. You didn't just have to use the brush. We're gonna paint the branches of the tree and the tree trunk first with brown. Then we're gonna let it dry. Then we're gonna go in with the greens. Make sure you're not putting your hand in the wet paint and then moving over here because you'll get a handprint other places. So remember, you can always turn your paper. So I didn't wet this first because I'm not covering a large space. So I'm just starting to paint with this brush. And this brush is really bad, but I'm still going to use it. But again, I'm painting in light, short strokes so that the paint I'm trying not to let it puddle. Like here, it's kind of puddling. So once it dries, we may need to go back in and do it Again, the other thing, because it's so yucky outside, if you want your painting to dry faster, you can use a hair dryer. You just have to be careful when you use the hair dryer that you're not blowing the paint around, okay? So hold it like way far away. Oops, sorry. Hold it way far away and just like wave it above, okay? Okay, so I'm just gonna finish my tree branches and let it dry. So you guys should know by now, I'm just doing this quick demo to give you some different techniques on painting with watercolors, because I know you haven't done it in a while. So remember to rinse your brush each time, and I keep dipping a lot because I'm trying to keep my paint wet. Okay, so there's my tree. We're gonna let that dry. And I'm gonna turn my paper again. Okay, so I dried my painting with my hair dryer. I'm not gonna do the grass yet though, because it's still a little damp and I just want to let it dry all the way before I start to do the grass. And I'm gonna do the grass the same way. I'm gonna take my sponge and wet where the grass would be and then add the grain to it. Right now I'm gonna do the building, and then I'm gonna show you how I'm doing the tree. And then that'll be it. You're on your own to paint as you wish. I'm actually gonna make my building purple for some reason, because I don't think this painting is gonna have a lot of color in it otherwise. And it doesn't really matter because it's my painting and I can choose if I make a purple building or not. It's hard to get a good clean edge with this brush. So I'm just trying my best. That's all I'm asking you guys to do. That's all I ever ask you to do. So now we're gonna do the leaves, and I'm gonna do it with the sponge again, because it'll give it some texture. Like the sky has a little bit of texture in it now. It almost looks like it has clouds on it without having clouds. Okay, so I'm just taking a little bit of this green, and I'm just gonna go right over top of the brown, because you're still gonna see the branches through. So again, just a little bit. And then if you want some darker spots, you can get more paint on your brush and like make some more deliberate. Okay, and because I don't want the grass and the tree to look exactly the same color, I'm gonna mix colors. This is all gonna be grass here too, so I'm gonna start and layer it. So I'm gonna put some yellow down first. And it doesn't have to, I'm not painting perfectly like I was the building. I'm just kind of, because we're gonna mix the colors right here. Okay, so now I'm gonna take some green and I'm just gonna mix it right on the paper. So now you can see the difference between the tree and the grass. I decided to give my grass a little bit more texture, or make it a little more interesting. I have salt, and if you remember from before, we used to use salt with the watercolor to give it an interesting effect. So I am just putting a little bit of salt. You can see me just very lightly sprinkling it. And then when the painting dries, it's going to, I will scrape the salt off. So I'm gonna let that dry. I would take your time and paint only the first layer this week. That way you can always go back in and add to it, okay? But if you see, I'm adding the yellow lines way after I painted the road. So see, if you can layer easily when you let stuff dry in between. And that's why it's gonna take more than just one class period to finish this. And that's the other issue too, is if you were working ahead, when you come to class the next week, you won't have any work to do. So that's fine if you want to work ahead, but there's not going to be any new information given. So we're going to be painting this, I guess, probably for 2 weeks, depending on how quickly people in school can paint it. So please take your time. And that's it for me.